I may, I think that there is a double standard. Yaakov Blake is a friend of mine, but the double standard in not glorifying Jewish criminals, of course, but there is a glorification of Jews who perpetrated crimes. For example, in the state of Israel, Menachem Begin, some of the leadership in Israel. And the reason for that is, for example, in the United States stresses the fact that dropping a bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki was a good thing because it essentially saved many American lives. At the same time, there was an awful lot of collateral damage to the Japanese because of the dropping of these bombs. And the reason why America has never had to account for this is because America has been victorious in most wars, all right, except perhaps for the Vietnam War. On the other hand, in Ukraine, I think the situation is distinct because Ukraine has always been under an occupier. For example, if we were to address the Volyhn situation, you can go, I don't know where to begin, the line of retaliatory action, all right? Whether you begin it from Khmelnytsky's time and ended on Akcja Wisla in 1947, and in the middle, in between somewhere is the Lozynskyj Akcja, if you consider that it was a genocide, all right? But there were retaliatory actions on the part of all nations. But the fact of the matter is that if you take the net result, aside from the Chinese who died under Mao's Cultural Revolution, no one suffered more or had more victims during the 20th century than the Ukrainians. This isn't coming from me. This is coming from Norman Davies, who was a reputable, actually outstanding historian professor, and who had, if I'm not mistaken, a Polish wife who probably would have inclined him to stress that the Polish people lost an awful lot of people as well. But because of our tragic history, I think we tend to be defensive. But in the case of, because we never controlled our own circumstances. But in the case of looking for demons, in my opinion, O'un Upa would never even come up as a demon were it not for Soviet propaganda, disinformation, and the need for the Holocaust industry to find new demons because they had run out of demons. Now, Soviet propaganda and forgery, I didn't spend any time on that, but you will all remember the John Dem'yanjuk case, all right? The documents that were forged by the Soviets and submitted to the Office of Special Investigations. I have with me a deposition that was taken in these war crime cases that went on in the United States, where the United States actually acceded to taking depositions of Soviet witnesses before a Soviet procurator. There were 4 Soviet procurators sitting around this poor witness, and he was supposed to deliver the facts, and the Americans took it in because they had an agenda. The agenda was to denaturalize, in this case, whoever it was, whether it was Kouzy or Dem'yanjuk. The Soviets were notorious for forgeries. In fact, we were referring to the Zhikepis, the autobiography of Yaroslav Stichko. Tsarennik didn't unearth this document. This document was unearthed in 1970, and it was used by a notorious Soviet agent, Michael Hanusak, a progressive, who published it in a book called Lest We Forget, as a diatribe against Yaroslav Stichko and the Ukrainian nationalists. And that's why, because the Soviets since day one, and they were, in fact, since OUN was created in 1929, that in Radянські часописи, the newspapers published articles against OUN, calling them fascists, even though OUN couldn't have been fascist because they were a national liberation struggle, not setting up any form of government, all right? But from the very beginning, the Soviets became involved in disparaging OUN UPA. For us, OUN UPA are heroes, all right? And I'm sure that there were members of OUN and UPA who perpetrated crimes. But as a general group, as an organization, as a movement, all right, they were struggling for Ukrainian independence. Sure, they may have been collateral damage, but it was not intentional collateral damage. There was no aim at any time, either on the part of OUN or UPA, to be a part of the final solution. All right? And they are heroes for us. And unfortunately, what Mr. Himka, and I with all due respect, I firmly believe that it's because he received money for it and because of his past. He was always an enemy of OUN UPA. He was always an enemy of OUN UPA. He was a progressive. He had his own agenda, all right? And frankly speaking, he was a perfect candidate. If I was a Holocaust industry, I would have conscripted him as well.
Just so you guys know, no one has sponsored this video, okay? I'm in the hole for this. Maybe somebody will come through in a couple days, I don't know. Final question. Mr. Lozynskyj, you made a really persuasive comment. You said the Ukrainians, you spoke about the Herculean task that Volodymyr Virtovich is facing, and the Ukrainians should be writing their own history. And at the same time, I was moved by what Mr. Himka said. I want clarity, I want truth, I want a comprehensive, sophisticated Ukrainian history that doesn't exclude any documents.
Right, but the fact of the matter is that there were many Soviet documents that were forgeries, and they were planted amongst documents that were legitimate documents. And the only way to determine them, I understand that forensic testing is an expensive proposition, but there are certain witnesses. Mr. Himka mentions that when he sent, I believe, his wife to Lviv to get accusatory remarks against the OUN from Ukrainians who reside in Lviv, she was unable to do so. And perhaps I'm not suggesting that there weren't any. I'm just suggesting that they were reticent in doing that because they were Ukrainian. But there is absolutely no doubt that the Soviets were masters in forging documents. They had entire laboratories, and they spent an awful lot of money on this information. And you can't simply accept everything Soviet as being real.
The document you mentioned in 1946 by Roman Rudenko, you don't think that kind of falls into the area? You think that's authentic?
Well, it's a declaration against interest.
Yeah, that's
the
point.
Which is he declared something. In other words, he made his case before Nuremberg. It would have been in his interest to impugn the OUN and the UPA. And he failed to do so. Why? Because he was friends with them? No. It was a declaration against interest.
We can conclude on that because you folks have been so generous with your...
I'm sorry, but I have to.
Yeah, you folks have been so generous. I want to thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very kindly both again. Thank you very much.
Take care.
Bye-bye.